It is a real pleasure for me to work with Kevin, to work with Peerpoint. We had a wonderful experience with their services and their approach to CME and accreditation. I want to introduce myself so that we will be on the same page. My name is David Orla. I am a licensed acupuncturist, and I'm practicing for 30 years. I'm seeing patients for just a little bit above 30 years now. But I have been teaching internationally for 20 years, specifically teaching medical doctors started in Tel Aviv and Haifa University School of Medicine. Then for 17 years I co-hosted, I'm using internet language now, I was the co-director and teacher of the acupuncture course for physicians. And now, through onomatopoeia seminars, I'm teaching in Munich Medical School. We've been invited a few times to Paris in the medical school through Professor Wolf, and various venues where I have to teach for medical doctors. And that perspective I would like to give to you, knowing how they like to see and have a presentation. The seminar itself, using Zoom, has arisen from need. And the need was a couple of years ago. We wanted to create a seminar where we invited a guest from Europe. The guest arrived a few days before, so there was no problem, and it was in Boston, Massachusetts. We had some attendants who were from the Boston area, and then a big storm came. Typical to Massachusetts, this big storm canceled all the flights, and people that paid for the seminar couldn't attend. It was really a big problem for us because we had a full class. Luckily, we had the sister of Gira Patel, and she gave us a wonderful idea. Why don't you do what we do at Oracle and go on Zoom? Not knowing what Zoom is or what this whole media is all about, we tried it. We had a few hours to practice, and on we went, and it was a very good success. We had a little bit of hiccups, and we're going to share that with you today. The second hiccup was when we tried to create a seminar in the DC area, and people in California really wanted to join, but they did not want to make the trip. That, of course, reminded us on Zoom, and we started to learn how to use that platform. The latest seminar that we wanted to do here in the Washington, D.C. area got all cancelled because of the COVID-19 situation and the response to it. Thus, we switched automatically everybody who was coming to the venue. We had a nice venue. We switched them automatically off to Zoom, and it was a flawless kind of seminar that we presented. So, we want to share this particular experience with you so that you will learn from the hardships that we had and gain a very good product to present to the physicians, and we'll tell you also a few of the positive and benefits of this particular venue using a camera and using a microphone. Right now I'm using a microphone that is not the computer's microphone, which is a very important suggestion. The finding is that if you want to do grand rounds, or if you want to do bedside patient education, you can do that very clearly and have a lot of attendance through peerpoint, much better than if you do it in your department or on your department. And especially in these kind of situations, where we all have to stay apart as best as possible, this is a perfect platform. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Let's see, next slide. So, you have everything ready. Computer is ready, your PowerPoint is ready, your LCD projector is ready, and right now you have a cancellation of all possible face-to-face presentations, and you need to get a digital platform. We used Zoom to give you that product, and the first thing that you have to do is obviously create an account. The different possibilities of the accounts are listed in the Zoom page, and you can see that here. We chose the Pro, which is the next to the free. It is a very good price, and then you can add to that features that we're going to talk about. The reason why we use Pro and not Business or other kind of ideas is because we do not need more than 100 attendants. Even when you use the Pro, you can always add attendants. So when we go to creating an account, we immediately can basically add on a webinar feature. This is a very important add-on because it gives you all the features that we were using from the moment you got your invitation, through the payment method, the amount of attendees, the way that a co-host, and we'll talk about that, can converse with other attendants, is all in the webinar package. This is an important webinar. And also large meeting, if you want to have more than 100 people, a large organization, if you have, for example, the need to do grand rounds and you want to broadcast that to the entire system, for example, if you do partners in Boston, you have definitely more than 100 physicians that would like to see a certain procedure. Or if you want to do it internationally, you can do that as well. So it might be an important feature for you. The next slide basically shows you that when you choose webinars, the settings that you can choose are quite numerous. And there are some settings which do not apply to milieux like ours, which is, I would say, regular webinars to educate medical staff or hospital staff or administrative staff, like what we're doing right now. Bedside patient education or physician education on a bedside of the patient. Grand rounds and medical education, continuous medical education. There are many settings to allow you to tweak, we call it, to massage the system. We're going to show you what we have chosen to conduct a seminar, which applies to everything I said before. So when you do the scheduling of the seminar, then you can start, quote, massaging the system. And that you do after you require the registration. I always think it's a very good idea to set a password, especially nowadays where security concerns are quite high due to the situation that we have. A lot of people are sitting at home and hacking around computers. It is not difficult to go into Zoom and just to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Zoom had issues with security. Therefore, the password limits it really to the people that we send an invitation. That allows much better control of attendees. And it's I recommend that very much. Also, the idea of video should be off if you have attendants that are not a panel. So if you have a meeting, which is different than webinars, if you have a meeting, you may want to have different kind of windows of the panelists and have a conversation. But if you have 100 physicians logging on, in order not to clutter the entire screen, you do not allow the videos to be on. You can turn them on during the webinar itself, one by one. And we'll talk about that when we talk about co-hosting. When we go to the webinars, you can see here the webinar button is still on, and we look at the webinar options. The question and answer feature we found is extremely helpful, and that is a very strong feature of the webinar setting, that if you have a co-host, the co-host can then answer all kinds of concerns and address all kinds of concern that the participants have during the lecture without interrupting the person who speaks. You see, when I'm giving the lecture and I suddenly see all kinds of questions, in between talking to a specific subject, I then need to read the questions and start answering. It's very disruptive, and nobody really gains content and quality with this kind of approach. So if you are an alone presenter, you can allow the question and answer and allocate certain times during the presentation to do that. And then you can go to the question and answer them. However, if you have more than one person that can help you in a department, for example, an assistant, a nurse, or an administrator that can help, you will allocate them to be a co-host, which again we will talk in a minute, and they will read the questions, and if they are contributing to the seminar, they will interrupt the flow as if they are a student in front of you and present the question. The presenter will repeat the question and then answer it, and that can promote actually the flow of the discussion. If you have a lot of participants, there are many questions that pop up, and people feel free to ask questions that sometimes are not really relevant to the flow. They're good questions, but they're not relevant to the flow, and then the co-host can answer them or give a message of saying, well, okay, we will address that at the end of the seminar. So question and answer feature is really important and allows a lot of flexibility and interaction. This feature, and this is good for hospital settings, this feature allows the interaction with the physicians, that if you use an external camera and you create a shot of a procedure, they can say, oh, could you please repeat that? And immediately you can repeat that up close and focused, and they can see very sharply how that procedure works. You can interact with the physicians and with any attendee, even if it is redundant. It's better to have these options to make sure that the quality and the content is perfect for the person who is listening. You also would like to look at the recording option. What we're doing in this particular session. I don't know if you can see that, but right now I'm recording this session, and you will find that recording posted, and you can request and people can watch it again and again. A huge benefit for educational system, and again I'm presenting for the medical education system. Physicians that see a procedure once and they want to make sure they didn't miss anything, or an examination or an interaction between patient and physician, they can watch it again and again and really familiarize themselves well with the presented material. Administration, and even when you look back to this particular seminar, you may want to answer a question and you remember, there was something said. You can go through the recording and back and forth, deepening your understanding and just repeating it, and it's good for the memory. It's a very good feature, and you don't have to use that. You can use the recording, record it. You don't like the recording, you can trash that recording, or you can even upload it and trash the recording. later to save space on the system. After that settings, you see that the meeting that you have created or the webinar that you have created has a URL. This is the address. It creates an address that then you copy and you can send it to anybody that you want to invite. And when you go to the email settings, and this is the settings that you do definitely want to edit, because when you edit the email settings, you can control the way that the email is looking. So everybody that went onto this particular webinar got a email with a nice banner, right? You can see the banner right here, and this is the banner that was created when we uploaded under branding. Yes, this is nice if you have an organization and you want to keep it streamlined. I know that in different kind of partnerships, cooperation, even in the military, you like to have everything in a certain kind of standard to make sure that there are no strays. And sometimes it's important because you can prevent people to go onto your system, pretend that you're you, and create havoc. Again, it's a security feature as well as a good standard of commerce. The scheduling a webinar gives you, like I said, a lot of different kind of features, and one of the setting features is, you can see here, the question and answer. Always allow the question and answer. You can, as a presenter, turn them off. There's a little window that comes in at the bottom. You can turn that off if you want to. You can co-host and allocate the question and answer to the co-host. And the important thing is, you have a record. You can keep a record of the questions and the answers that are given or not given, and then see, okay, I did not address a certain kind of a question and it keeps repeating itself. You can email or pick up the phone or even continue a series of presentation and then address those questions. It's always a good thing to have a record of the questions so people can interact, and you can go on and see how can you improve your own presentation. It's a very good tool. Going into the settings, and now there's a whole list of buttons, a lot of buttons that you will see coming up. I will give you the buttons that we found the most important to edit, the most important to control, so that your presentation will definitely have the features that A, you are seeing here now, B, the features that you might want to have in your hospital settings or corporation setting, clinic setting, and these will then help you create a product that you can work with. And then if you want to have additional little tweaks, we call again massaging it, you can. So the computer audio is obviously an important feature. To that computer you can then add external microphone. I have here an external microphone with an elongation cord, which allows me, to go a good distance away from the computer, from the laptop itself. That microphone allows me to move about and treat the patient, give a demonstration. The camera can then follow with me, and I'm not constricted to a little cord that is creating a restriction of movement. I will talk about these features a little bit because there might be difficulties with people with wireless equipment, and I will talk about that later. You also definitely want to make sure that only people that you want to log on can log on. You definitely would like to keep the sessions private. If they are patient-based, obviously, we have a lot of HIPAA rules, regulations. If you want to keep them closed-knit within your organization, and it is a good measure to have authenticated user. Now you can authenticate any user that requests and you agree, but to keep it open reveals a lot of the Zoom known, I would call, security problems. Now we chose Zoom also because the security problems were published and fixed. There's a lot of platforms out there like Google Meet, Hangouts, WhatsApp, there is Skype. They have known security problems that are not addressed. They're kind of kept a little bit under the carpet and not published, and therefore I don't trust them so much in terms of HIPAA and in terms of just having a good webinar without external interference. Zoom actually has proven itself to be very good this way. The other one is password, and that just repeats what I wanted to say about security. Here, the go down a little bit. Okay, here the marcation is that we have participants come in and basically be muted. It is good for them. It is good for us. And the reason why is that if you have, let's say, 50 people and all are with microphones on, and nowadays, due to our situation, a lot of people are at home, and maybe children are going around, or the gardener has the lawnmower on. That's one thing. But even when this particular situation passes and we are in our professional milieu, we don't need to have ourselves broadcasted to everybody, and obviously the people that do create and present the seminar don't need everybody's audio feed to go into their speaker, whether it is in their ears or in the room speakers. So it is a very good measure to mute the participants upon entry. Also, again, I mean, it might be very, very obvious, but for you guys to know that there is a button that can do that, I think is valuable to know. You can always unmute somebody specific when they want to present a question and you want the public to hear that question. So you have a control to unmute. The co-hosting is something that I would like to talk about again a little bit more because it makes the presenter's work very easy in streaming and talking and concentrating on what they want to say, where the co-host is allocated to answer questions, to monitor if there's a problem with the audio and fix it, to interact between the participants on one hand and the speaker on the other hand. If you possibly can have somebody to help you out and co-host seminar, that is probably the best idea to do. You don't have to allocate co-host if you don't want to, but if you keep this button clicked on, the system will allow you to do that. So therefore, again, you don't have to do that, but if you keep that button on, you can do that, and I highly recommend to do so. Also, when we are looking at sharing is what I'm doing right now. Sharing is basically taking a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, and sharing it with everybody else. Again, I will show you how it is done, but look what happens if I do stop sharing. All right? This is what happens when stop sharing is occurring. You don't see the PowerPoint. And when I go back to share the screen, we go and see the presentation again. All right. So you definitely want to have that feature on. You can do it co-host, all the hosts, and you do not want participants to start sharing the screen unless they're panelists and you have 4, 5, 6 people that interact on a project. But if you do a presentation for the public, The public can be a bunch of physicians that basically log on as grand rounds. They want to see a procedure. They don't need to share, and you don't want them to share their ideas and their papers in the middle of the presentation. Okay, that is a good thing to make it host only, and or you can do the host and co-host. They can share screens. Now, virtual background. A virtual background can be very useful if you have an office that has many distractions, let's put it this way, that you don't necessarily want the people that are participating in the seminar to see. It can be very useful if you have a lab and you don't need people to see what the lab is doing. You definitely can create a virtual background. The problem with virtual background is if you pay very close attention to the contour of my shape, you can see it's almost like a paper cut. Like somebody took scissors and cut my figure out and pasted it on a background. If I move quickly, you can see that I'm moving in a fluid kind of environment. You can see, right? You can see the green screen, which is behind me, appearing. You can turn it on, you can turn it off. The problem with the background is it takes bandwidth. So if you have a good internet and solid internet connection, you can use that successfully. If the internet connection is a little bit slower, remote areas, or you don't have a very wide bandwidth, it will take a lot of the presentation, and the voice and picture will become delayed. This is this annoying kind of occurrence when you speak and then a second later the voice comes, or the voice comes and then the second later the picture comes, and that you want to prevent. Okay, now there was a perfect kind of interaction between co-host and presenter. I was asked to speak a little bit softer, so what I'm doing is I'm moving the microphone a little bit away, and I'm going to talk a little bit softer. See, this is the thing, when you're accustomed to speak to a large audience live, automatically when you appear in front of the computer, you think it's a live audience, you shout at the computer, and that's a good point to make, really, to make sure that you have a person who listens and will tell you to speak a little bit softer. Okay. Now, recording, I said, is already good, and the idea of email notification is also very, very important. If you have 100 or 2 or 1,000, it doesn't matter, attendees, and they're all scattered around, you do want to make sure that everybody gets the message if things are cancelled, if things change, if things move in time, or if the password has changed, just to make sure that everybody gets it, and you don't have to sit there and go email by email and make sure manually that everybody is on the same page. The registration setting is definitely a good setting to massage and to make sure that all the features here are very well recognized. One, you can automatically approve people who register, so you don't have a waiting room. That means people that register, they log on, they're in. A waiting room is good if you want to screen people or you want to hold them from logging on while you're doing other things, and then you can allow them. There is definitely good things and bad things in both situations. The other options, again, they're all pretty straightforward. The idea here in terms of the registration is to show you that this button should be considered. Take a good look at what fits your setting and then move on, because it's, again, the preparation for a fee can be something you want to use. these settings are good if you present a product that is important for physicians, and you have worked a lot of time on it, and the organization needs to collect some fees in order to cover their costs, etc., etc. Not everybody wants to use that, not everybody will use that, but to know that this is there is a very good thing. Also, it's not that straightforward, and that's why we're going to. That's why the slides that everybody could download will show you really how to do. So when you go to the registration, which is in the settings, and in the registration settings, you will allow a registration to happen, and with fees. So change registration fee. You can change it here. You can see this is an email that you will have a PayPal account. Now it works with PayPal. PayPal accepts credit cards and all other kinds of payments. The PayPal is also very straightforward, and if you don't have one account, you can immediately create one really within minutes. So if, for example, I am a clinical organization, I would like to present something very unique. I would like to have lots of physicians and or administrators and or clinical staff, nurses, want to educate nurses in a certain kind of procedure or measure or knowledge. I don't have a PayPal account. I can immediately create one and then go back to my Zoom and put my details right here. Important is to save it. If you just move on to another window, it is not saved, and that happened to us once, so we had to go back, redo the PayPal, save it, and then make sure that we are on, and you can control it because a pop-up window of PayPal will come up. Then you go back to the webinars. Okay, we were at settings. This is the button of settings. So we go back to the webinars to make sure that we approve that setting that allows payment. Okay, so there is a double control, and this is the thing that we had to figure out. It took some time. It's a double control to make sure that you can, and the system will allow to collect a registration. So in the invitation, we went out from the settings into webinars. We go into invitation. We go to the approval registration. We edit it here. And then we have a whole window that will allow us to, again, massage it according to your needs. But the main button here is that a registration is required and will charge a certain dollar amount. And that's it. When you hit Save All, again, important to hit the Save All button, then you basically can start hosting. So, you're done massaging the system, and what I showed you, of course, is only the tip of the iceberg, but this is the tip that we use now a few times, and this is the settings that I presented right now are really the most practical settings that are worthwhile to know and work with. So now you're going to host a meeting. You click on hosting the meeting, and here you are. The silhouette is the host, and you can click on the bottom of your screen and to see the participants. So here's the participant, and that is you. Now, you can email and invite, for example, the person who is going to be your co-host or a panelist or a participant, if you go through that system. Unless you have an automatic system, all the participants are going to start listing on, and you can see them. So once your co-host basically logs on, this is you. And so you email. The email is generated. It will include the IP number, the setting number, and the password, and then you co-host to be. This is their window. Okay, that's from the point of view of the co-host. They see you and themselves above. What you do is you go to the setting. You move your cursor just like I'm doing right now, and you move it down or up, and some systems like Windows have a different kind of pop-up setting, but you go to the participants. You go to the participants, you see the two participants, which is one is you, the other the co-host to be. You click on that options, and you make that person that you want a co-host. Sometimes, and that is usually the case, that first you have to create a panelist, which means you go to the person that you invited, the participant, you go to more, which is here, more, and you make them a panelist. Then you go up in the corner and you click on the panelist, and then you promote them to be a co-host. Again, the reason why you are choosing one or two co-hosts is to make sure that your lecture is flawless and streaming and without interruption. And if attendants have questions, they will be taken care of the co-host, and if there is an immediate problem, the co-host will address the speaker directly as if they're a participant in the class and mitigate the problem. Then you have the screen. This is the screen of the co-host, and we have the host. And what I did here is you share the screen. This is basically already a shared screen. So, but what I wanted to show you is that the co-host can see questions and answers. And this is a window that will pop up if you choose it. Again, you move your cursor, you can see Q&A. You can pop this window up, and the co-host can start interacting with the participants. So we go back to what we do in terms of sharing screen. And this is a really nice feature that makes the work of the presenter much, much easier. And I'm going to tell you one little thing before that. When we did our first course, we didn't really understand the idea of sharing screen. So we took the computer camera, we turned it around to the LCD projector and the speaker, and the people that basically looked at the webinar, they got not the best quality, because if a camera looks at the LCD projector, because it is a light emitting system and the speaker is usually dark, we have very strong contrast, and it was a big problem. But it saved the entire seminar, meaning Zoom saved the entire seminar. Otherwise, we couldn't have those people who were stuck in the storm. But then we learned you can actually share a screen, and the presenter can have a little bit of a window for themselves. The people that are listening can see the presenter, which is, I think, always a good idea to have the interaction with the presenter. By even looking, it helps the learning. But they have a nice screen that gives you the handout and or the video and the feed from the camera, etc., etc. So what you do is you have to open up your PowerPoint. If you use PowerPoint, you first have to open up your PDF. If you use a PDF, you first have to open your application or whatever window that you're choosing to present with, and keep it open. Then you choose at the bottom of the screen something called Share Screen, and you have here the options to choose. So I will choose the keynote presentation, and here it is. So this is my screen now. My picture is up on the top. This is the host. My computer desktop is basically shown now and shared now. So remove all the things that you don't need on your desktop to be presented out of the way. And you have your keynote open. Now, if you click the play button, the keynote, and this is also something good to know, the keynote will behave exactly like a live presentation, which means if you have fancy transitions, with fire that bring in the fonts and so on and so forth, it will do that. It will play the videos that you have embedded into the presentation, which you will see in a minute. And you have the co-host, the host, and the presentation very beautifully actually presented here and controllable. And you can go back and forth and make the slides appear exactly the way that you want them to appear when you're using an LCD projector. So I was, very impressed by that particular feature. And here again, the person that is helping you can look at the question and answer. They can see the panelist as well as the attendants. An attendant, as you can see, can raise their hand. They go to the bottom of the screen and they can raise their hand and they can ask a question. And that will then be addressed by the co-host. And Zoom has a lot of teaching manuals, teaching videos. They have a lot of pages that will give you really good information if you want to dig deeper into that presentation. Okay, what we have found out that we can really give a presentation that sometimes tops in terms of content and in terms of clarity the ability in a live seminar setting. So if you're on a stage and you have a volunteer and you want to present a specific procedure, my job as an acupuncturist, especially in clinical setting, I am a rather clinical person and I require hands-on for every single patient. So when I do clinical demonstration, I really need the participants to see how my hands are working and to see the patient respond vis-a-vis my handwork. So I really want the camera to go in and zoom in. So if you have a big audience and you have a cameraman that presents the procedure, sometimes the cameraman is really in the way and there's no control, and people that are sitting in the front cannot see so well because the cameraman is in the way, or the light is not optimal to the situation. Here we can control the camera, the shot, we can control the light. Participants through the question and answer can request a repeat of the take or a different angle, or maybe in certain situations you have a ventral view, could you please go to a lateral view? And these situations are perfect within that webinar settings. Also, you can have the recording and people will see it again and again. So that's very nice. External devices that we talk about help a lot in this situation, and they're not that expensive if you look at it from a hospital, corporation, and even a private point of view. And you can pick and choose what you need according to your requirements. The camera, for example, an external camera with good light will give you and this is the video embedded, will give you a good shot that you can control, and you can see the little features of the patient to monitor the procedure. You can talk and have a zoom in of the camera into specific anatomical landmarks, which are very hard to see if you are standing around the presenter, or if you are in a hall with many attendees. And even if the camera through an LCD projector presents to a big group, you can really not get that clarity of a presentation. So what you do is you stop sharing screen and you present through the video that you have, and then you can really go and in detail show everybody what you want to see, or what them to see. And they can always come back and ask you, can you do it again? Can you show me a different angle? And so on and so forth. So the little devices start with a microphone. Now, again, I'm using the what you can see here, 1199 microphone that is an external plug-in microphone, which has an earbud, and it has a microphone attached to it with the elongation. Now, make sure, for example, if you are a Macintosh user, I think Apple user, that you have 1, 2, 3, 4 divisions, and the elongation will have 1, 2, 3, 4 divisions as well. The reason why I'm saying that, and that applies to all of the external instruments, is you're excited, you see something that you really like, you purchase it, you think you're all set, you come to the seminar, you plug it in, and it doesn't work. Why? Sometimes because of a silly little detail that you didn't see, that the adapter and the elongation don't really match the system that you're working with. Now, in many cases, it is a good thing to try about a week or 10 days or whatever system that you use to ship the goods to you, whether it is through UPS or through there's Amazon or through USPS, or it takes a certain amount of time to get to you. Take that time, subtract that from the time of your seminar, and then start, I would say, practicing, so that if you need to replace something, you can do that with good time. I found that the wireless system in terms of microphone can be a problem, especially cross-platform, which means that if you have a camera plugged in and you have a microphone plugged in and you want to present in split windows, it can cause havoc and not always work the way that you want to. So if you want to have a microphone which is wireless, it's best to connect it to the camera, but keep a cord with elongation handy that you can present. You can try to present that through the computer as well, but you need to try it. So what we tried and worked well for us is this particular system where you have a dongle which is the transmitter, and you have a dongle which is the receiver. So with the microphone we have the transmitter that you put in your pocket, and the microphone you clip here, and the receiver is hooked to the computer. And again, make sure that the adapters, the plug-in, really fits your system. Otherwise you need a converter. Also, what I wanted to say in terms of microphone, the way that you carry a microphone is also of some importance. There are people who are very dynamic. They work with hands, and if the microphone is not inside tucked in, it can rip out without the speaker noticing, and suddenly everybody starts not listening. Also, I'm using an application on my cell phone, and you cannot see it. Now you can. Here we go. There you go. On my cell phone, I'm using an application which is Remote Mouse. It is very nice. I don't have to come to the computer and actually, change it. I can keep my talk and go backwards and go forwards just using the cell phone. So that's a very, very nice feature. Of course, you have other remote mice that you can use, but then they take plugs, and if you have a camera plugged in and a microphone plugged in and maybe another external device plugged in, there is a limit to some computers, and also the quality of how they work if you have too many things plugged in. So something to consider. This particular remote mouse also gives you the ability, to control the videos. It gives you the ability to go and move the arrow Okay, what it doesn't give you the ability is to play around, well, with the different kinds of error. Then you have to upgrade and use other applications. But this is something practical. It's not, you know, necessary. Now, the one thing that, again, if you do grand rounds, bedside patient treatment, seminars with procedures, and you want to have a nice video, and you want to have a good clear shot, and you want to connect it to the computer so that Zoom can actually broadcast it. And this is why you need this little middleman here. Okay, that middleman is a mini recorder that is a bridge between your camera and your computer. Okay, so that particular bridge is important, and there are different kinds. This is a rather, believe it or not, I mean, it's $300 some, so you can sometimes think it's expensive, but if you look at the other systems that are out there, it's really not. And you can get a camera for, you know, $130, and you definitely can get other systems that work well. However, make sure that when you connect everything in a row, that it will connect to Zoom. Not just that it will work on your computer, that Zoom will recognize it, and you can broadcast with Zoom through that. So there are also wireless systems that can transmit wireless HDMI. They're much, much more expensive, and they don't always work so flawless. So you have to be in a proximity that sometimes is not that good. So if you have a nice HDMI cable that connects, you can see from here, the port to the camera, and of course make sure that the camera HDMI is adapted. You can have a rather long cord, and you can move to all, circling the patient, and move to all positions you want to. I found that very, very useful when I do clinical seminars. I just take the camera that I have and I turn it to the treatment table, and then I can stop sharing the screen and go only with the video feed, and people that want to repeat shots and look at the shots can have a very, very clear view of that. The picture depends on light. A good light gives you a good picture, and there are very, very cheap solutions, and there are very, very expensive solutions. The cheap solution that I'm actually using right now is the umbrella, so that you can look right into the light. The light gives you a nice photograph opportunity. It doesn't blind you. You don't need shades to do that. And it's $31 or $32, and it's really a good thing to have, even if you do presentations just in your office. You open up the umbrella, plug in the light, and you have a very nice light coming at you. That the picture is very good. Now, if you do, again, bedside, you take this very light device with you and you just put it above the patient. Now, of course, you can also have light that is much more sophisticated, like this particular light, or a light that connects to the camera itself, and do procedure shots and examination shots and so on. But always remember that a good light is a condition to a good picture. That's it. So things that I found out which are very awkward, like I told you, I have experience, and I like teaching with audiences that are in the class. I look at their faces. I can know when I'm not funny anymore, when I'm not really on target, when I'm straying and people start looking at the ceiling. It's very hard when you do that talking to a video camera. The feedback is extremely limited. You might go off on different kind of subjects and you forget where you are. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind, and then if you are a presenter, you can definitely do a good job. Whether it is 100 people, and if this number scares you, 20 people, and if this number scares, imagine you have your family looking at you and it's a practice run. So, and it is okay to correct yourself, and it is okay to say, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that, that is fine. Acting natural in front of the camera is something that needs practice, and it doesn't come naturally to people who present live. So that's something to also think about. Keep eye contact to whom are you speaking. So this time you're speaking into the camera, right? And I have two cameras here, so two cameras. And when you move with the camera demonstration, make sure that you have a tripod and that it's not moving too much. One of the mistakes we made is we moved the camera and people started to get seasick. So it's important to make sure that the camera is held stable. And again, I think that this summarizes the presentation of what we have to offer you. Questions are definitely important, and we are happy to answer them. We are making this presentation available through a video link that you can see. And I think that, my favorite picture, and I think that right now it is important for Kevin to present the aspect of the CME gaining to the presentation. Kevin, you with me? Is Kevin with me? Guido? Kevin, you with me?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what I would like to cover are basically three things. We're going to talk about an overview of accreditation for live streaming presentations. I'm going to spend some time about commercial promotion, exhibits, and sponsors. Very important things to say about that. And then also going to talk about the publication of accreditation, designation, statements, and disclosures. So if we could have the next slide, please. Now, one of the things that would be important for you to know, and I'm just going to adjust my screen here. Okay, one of the important things for you to know is that there really is no difference between applying for a live CME activity that's in person and a live streaming CME activity. Okay, many of the details are the same, although when it comes to location, you would simply say that you're doing a live internet. And sometimes this is a little bit confusing because when I mentioned to people doing a live presentation on the internet, a lot of people seem to think enduring material. But actually, a live presentation via the internet is the same as a live presentation in person, so it's not considered an enduring material. Although when you make your application, you'd be mentioning that it's going to be live internet instead of at a particular geographical location. Your educational planning is pretty much the same. You want to be addressing practice gaps properly. In other words, what is the knowledge, the competence, the performance, or the patient outcomes that you're addressing? What are your outcomes that you hope to have from the education? And those types of things are the same as they normally would be. But in terms of why this type of activity, there might be some challenges in terms of explaining why you do something live on the internet. So one of the things that right now I think can be used as an explanation is our current situation with the COVID-19 virus. There are many, if not all, live presentations that happen all over the place for medical education, and they're being postponed, they're being canceled. We've actually had two of our joint providership clients have already taken their live and turned it into a live internet streaming event with a great deal of success. So that certainly can be the why. And then when you used to talk about during a live in-person event, you would talk about the interaction between people. You can still talk about that because as you've already seen, as David demonstrated, you can have questions and answers going on. There can be discussion among people based on what they want to know. Okay, so depending on the platform, you can have more or less interactivity. Finally, the calculation of the number of CME credits is also the same. If you're doing a live presentation and you are taking breaks at different points, just like when you're taking breaks in person, you want to be careful that you go for that you calculate that in so that you don't overcalculate your CME. Now, the second thing that I'd like to talk about, we can go to the next slide, please. Commercial promotion. So commercial promotion concerning exhibits, sponsors, and things like that. This is presenting a rather interesting conundrum that we have actually been communicating with ACCME about. So I'll get to the points on the screen in a minute, but essentially standard 4.2 from the ACCME regulations is what controls this. And the way that we deal with this when we have live presentations, when you're in person, particularly if you have a larger conference, is oftentimes you'll have an exhibit hall, you'll have an area separate from the educational area where commercial promotion, sponsors, exhibits, those kinds of things happen. Okay, now, since standard 4.2 also applies to a live internet presentation, that has presented some challenges, and we have been discussing this with ACCME to come up with a solution. So I wanted to read something from ACCME which presented the original challenge. If you provide opportunities for commercial interest to advertise, exhibit, or provide promotional information in association with your internet-based CME activity, it should be in a virtual space that is outside of the accredited educational component of the activity, should not be referenced from within the accredited activity, and the learner must receive clear notification when he or she is choosing to leave the accredited education portion of your website. Now, here's the problem with that. If you have, say, commercial sponsors and others that are contributing to what you're doing, there has to be a way for people to get there. And this particular rule by ACCME seems to say that in this screen, in this area of presentation in front of you, there should not be anything to do with commercial promotion here. Now, I would understand that you do not want to have sponsor logos, you do not want to have sponsor messages, and also, if you're doing multiple presentations, you cannot stop and have sponsor presentations between your educational presentations. However, after discussing with ACCME, we pointed out that if you're at a live presentation, oftentimes you'll see signs, exhibit hall this way, so on and so forth. And so we brought this again to ACCME's attention, and what they did say is that, yes, if, for example, somewhere within the area on the screen where somebody is watching your live presentation, you would like to have a button or a link of some sort that would take people to the commercial promotion area for sponsors and others, that would be allowable. Okay, and that's a big step forward because now we have a way to let people go and see the sponsors, or if you have virtual exhibits or things like this. Once you have gone away from the screen where the education is taking place to another area, there are a lot of different things you can do. If your sponsors wish to give you videos that people can look at, if they have different types of things, downloads, whatever, you can do a lot of different things there as long as that part of it is not within the area that you're doing education. But you are permitted to give a link of some sort within your presentation area that takes people to the sponsorship area. We could have the next slide, please. As I mentioned, you can have live streaming in the virtual area. You can have a generic link. You could even provide downloaded PDFs that people can keep. So that way, for example, sponsors normally would hand out brochures. In this case, they can hand out virtual brochures. Next slide, please. So the last part of what I wanted to speak about are the accreditation and designation statements. Now, as usual with live streaming, the accreditation and designation statements must be published, as well as those that have relevant financial relationships. All of this must be published, not may, must. Okay, so first of all, in any marketing or advertising brochure that mentions CME accreditation, you must have the accreditation and designation statements published. If you're sending out an email, it must be there. If you're having a marketing brochure, it must be there. On any website which is advertising this webinar or the online live presentation, the accreditation and designation statements must be there. But in addition, things to think of is that if you are advertising or marketing or promoting your event, for example, on LinkedIn or on Facebook, and you use the terms CME, CME accreditation, so forth, then the accreditation and designation statements must be there as well. Now, at this point, I would think it kind of leaves out Twitter, because I was looking at it the other day, and I think it would be very hard to get all of that into a Twitter message. But for other types of social media, you just recall that if you use the expressions CME, accreditation, credit, so on and so forth, you must publish the accreditation and designation statements. Next slide, please. Now, one thing I will mention concerning the accreditation and designation statements, it's important that people see those prior to registering for the seminar. So wherever you use them, if you're not promoting it in email, at least on the website where people come to register, they must see the accreditation and designation statements, or at least be able to see them before they actually register for the activity. Now, in terms of the disclosure of financial relationships, that's a little bit different, okay? The disclosure of financial relationships must happen before people see the presentation. If it's a live internet presentation, then they must see it before they see the rest of the presentation. You may have noticed at the very beginning of the slide deck that we went through that the financial disclosures were on the third slide, I believe, and there weren't any in this case, okay? So the first thing I'd address is that if you have an educational activity program or an electronic application, so what I'm calling a program here, for example, would be a PDF that could be downloaded that somebody could have. Or these days, many people going even to live in-person events have electronic applications with a lot of information. So in either of those cases, the disclosure of financial relationships must be published either in the educational activity program or in the electronic application. Very important. Now, in the absence of an actual program or an application, the publication must be in each handout that is distributed either in print or electronically. Now, I'm going to also differentiate here. If you have a larger conference going with many different presentations, you may want to do a single financial disclosure report similar to the one that you would get from peerpoint for those who are joint providership partners with peerpoint, which contains all of this disclosures for everybody that has a relevant financial relationship for the entire event. And that could go in the application, the program, or in a handout. If you don't have that, the other option is that you can, if you have separate presentations, you can also have the financial relationship disclosures go within that individual PowerPoint presentation, for example. Okay. In the case of live streaming activities and enduring materials presented via the internet, you must have that on the platform where the activity is being presented. Usually at the beginning of a presentation is probably the best place for that to happen. So just a reminder then that when you're doing marketing, if you talk about credits, you talk about CME accreditation, you talk about all of that, you must publish the accreditation and designation statements wherever that is published. In the absence of a program or activity, it must also be there in print or electronically. In the case of live streaming activities and enduring materials, it's presented via the platform. And that kind of brings me to the end of what I wanted to talk about in terms of CME accreditation. Just a couple of notes before we move on to questions and answers. Later today, you will receive an email that will give you access to the CME and CEU via peerpoint's CME Vault. And those will be available later today. So at this point, I think we can move to questions and answers if there are any.
Okay. Let me just see if I can look at the participant question and answers. So I see that there are a couple of answers that were published.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not getting anything. All right. So again, if anybody has problems that they're encountering with getting online, using the Zoom platform, not getting the output that they want to get from the Zoom output, I'm happy to be an assistant. People can contact us, and we try our best to give you the answers. You will have definitely access to this video to see it again and again. And the handouts that we have provided, they most definitely give you a step-by-step possibility to look at the buttons, at least. You know, everybody has a different setting, but the buttons are important. So,
and if you don't mind, David, we did get a question come in, and I see that Gira has addressed it, but I'm going to address it as well. The question asks is, to be clear, we need to display financial disclosures before each presentation. The answer to that is actually it depends. If you have a place where somebody can see all of the financial disclosures in one place available via the live stream, then no, you don't have to put that before every single presentation. If you do not have an area where people can see all financial disclosures before that they see the presentation, then yes, you should put it before each presentation. And if you want to do both, that would be all right as well. But so that would answer that question. Kimberly, was there anything else on that? Is that clear for you? Great.
So there's another question about poll. Everywhere in other platforms allows voting certain questions used. Yes, so there's definitely polling allowed in Zoom. There's a button when you go to settings that allows polling. And when that is on, the participants will get the opportunity within their windows. Okay. If there's anything else that Gira wants to add, she can definitely address that as well.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think that
I think, David, we do have one more question.
Yes.
There seems to be a misspelling. It says when you have live stream, does that mean at a specific time for your presentation? I'll interpret that question. I believe it means, are you live streaming at a particular time? And the answer to that is yes. Live streaming does mean live streaming that you're starting at a particular time that you want people to be there, the same as any other live presentation. And hopefully
yes.
Hopefully that answers the question for that person.
Yes, absolutely, and definitely if you create grand rounds or shorter presentations like the one that we have, the best thing to do is what Kevin has done with this presentation, is to set it to midday so that people in California as well as people in Europe could definitely have a comfortable or reasonable accessibility. We had the seminar that ran 2 days over the weekend. We needed to start 9 o'clock Washington DC time, which was really, really tough for all the California participants who had to get up in the morning at 4 o'clock and sit in front of the screen. The good thing is you can sit in front of the screen with your pajama and cup of coffee, but you do have to get up in the morning to do that. So live really means that, and I think this is a very good question because it is to be considered if you have presentations that go global.
Okay, I think that's it. All right, well, I want to thank everybody for attending today. And again, David and I are both available if you have any questions concerning live internet accreditation, please direct them to me. Anything concerning equipment and technology, please direct those to David, and wish you a great end of your weekend, and thank you for attending.
Thank you very much from our point of view. Bye-bye.